Well, I hope you grabbed your sleds because it is time for week 2 of Icy Veins, hosted by me, Gabe Shumway. Brand new show on the sports block for the winter quarter. Every 7 o'clock on every Sunday of this quarter, we're going to be talking about the Winter Olympics, the sports that it involves, and the broader scope of the event itself. This week, I have two amazing guests. Yanyan, if you want to scoot over a little to your left so you can be in the frame, we have Yanyan and Calvin on this week. Two amazing guests to talk about many amazing sports. So, without further ado, I say we get right into this thing with our first segment. I call it Lighting the Cauldron. Every year at the Winter Olympics, or well, not every year, I suppose every year they hold the Winter Olympics or Summer Olympics, the Olympic cauldron is lit by one or more legendary figures. Typically, these athletes have some sort of connection to the host country. So when the Olympics were in Tokyo, it was tennis great Naomi Osaka and badminton gold medalist Ayaka Takahashi. In Vancouver many years ago, we saw the likes of Steve Nash and Wayne Gretzky. We've seen full teams, relay partners, and individuals light these cauldrons in years past to kick off the Olympic celebrations. So it is prediction time. Give me the person or the people who you think will be lighting the cauldron at this year's Olympics. What made or is making their career so impactful, and what is this connection to the Italian fans?
I'll start. I had two predictions, but I'm leaning towards one in terms of career significance. And the two people that I had in mind were Federica Pellegrini, Italian swimmer, and Yannick Sinner. And I feel like even though Yannick Sinner, I feel like right now is like currently the bigger name, and he has a Winter Olympics connection because even though he's a tennis player, he grew up as a skier actually and was skiing up until his
Oh,
teens before he chose to focus on tennis.
I didn't know
He
that actually.
I think he did like a crossover photo op with Lindsey Vonn because of his skiing background. But I'm gonna go with Pellegrini because she won an Olympic gold medal in swimming in 2008, and just beyond that, I feel like she has such cultural significance for the Italians, like in terms of like her social media following and like the amount of followers she has, like kind of expands beyond the sport of swimming. And in terms of like people who are Italians and have like Olympic sports connections and are well known by the Italian general public, I'm gonna go with her.
Yeah, absolutely. I was considering saying Sinner for this, but I'm gonna go with Carolina Costner, an Olympian, a bronze medalist back in 2014 as a figure skater. She was a European champion 5 times, so certainly one of the greats to do it in terms of Italian athletes. And she really has a family of athletes: a brother who plays ice hockey professionally in Italy, and a cousin and godmother who was a silver medalist in alpine skiing in the '02 Winter Olympics. So it's not often that you can say you have one family member who's won an Olympic gold medal, but how about two? I mean, that's a great connection there for you there, and obviously no longer active in the world of figure skating, but still someone who I think could be a big figure to represent and light the cauldron.
It's kind of funny you say that, Calvin. The one question that I had to cut from this week's rundown was, "Give me your favorite Olympic family," because there's one Olympic family, especially this year, that has 3 active athletes competing and a younger brother who just missed qualification. So there's almost 4 siblings across the world of skiing in different events this year. Um, Yan, Calvin and I did predict you were going to say Yannick Sinner before you got here.
Almost right, almost right.
I think my pick is Fefe, Fernando De Giorgi, who's the Italian volleyball coach. I feel like when you're thinking of the sports that are kind of synonymous with Italy, that they're always doing well at, you think of volleyball, or at least I think of volleyball. I think of Italy and I think of Turkey. And Ferdinando De Giorgi is kind of a legend in the volleyball world, coaches the men's team to many world championships and Olympic greatness. And I feel like that's the type of person that you might expect to see walking out as someone who had that connection as a player in '88 in the Olympics and also has transitioned into coaching now. But without further ado, we have more coming your way in the elusive medals category for this week. So the Winter Olympics are often defined by the upstart or the underdog countries that make deep runs out of nowhere. So these games have become synonymous with Cool Runnings, the Jamaican bobsled team, for example. And this year, the Philippines have 2 alpine skiers as one example. That's representing a country that to date has never recorded snowfall in the Winter Olympics. One has moved to Italy, the other into Utah. Monaco's bobsleigh team might be poised for a medal. They finished 6th before. Monaco hasn't won an Olympic medal for a sport. They won it for architecture in the 20s. But with all that being said, do you guys have a favorite all-time underdog story in any Olympic sport, or a team that you might be watching out for this year? Floor is yours.
Yeah, I can start this one. I mean, there are a lot of favorites. I think, the easy answer might be to say something like the Miracle on Ice, but of course that's easy, and I think everyone can know about that. And maybe this one's a pretty popular answer too, but I'll go with Eddie the Eagle, a ski jumper
Mm-hmm.
who, he wasn't great in the Olympics. He technically placed last place in his event, but set a new British record with 71 meters in terms of ski jumping. And so it's similar where it's like you have a specific nation that you don't expect maybe making an impact in a specific sport in the Winter Olympics. And so he didn't really have any experience either. There weren't facilities, there weren't really ways for him to train in the same ways. And yet he worked his way up and was able to qualify, obviously, and set a record for his people or for his country and be able to make an impact and represent in that way. So it's not necessarily something like an underdog upstart getting gold, but certainly a cool story. And then for this year, I'm really excited to watch Simona Di Silvestro attempt to qualify for bobsleigh because, I mean, it's always great when we see these dual sport or multiple sport athletes, and she's one of them, a great race car driver who's been competing since 2022 in bobsleigh. So can she make a huge impact in two different sports? We will find out. I think there's certainly a good chance.
We're seeing that a lot in ski mountaineering too. It's a lot of like very much athletes that are coming from other sports that are trail runners or like were brought up as kind of track athletes that are transferring into it. So I feel like that's something cool with a lot of Winter Olympic sports is you see a lot of that kind of cross sport pollination.
Okay, Gabe, when I read the elusive first medal, I kind of took that literally as in like someone who has not won an Olympic medal yet, but
Oh, that's perfectly valid.
my pick is someone who's pretty established in the Winter Olympics world, but has yet to compete in his first Olympic, and that is American figure skater Ilya Malinin,
Yeah.
who is also known by his nickname of the Quad God because he is the first figure skater to ever land the quadruple axel move, which is like the move of all moves in figure skating. He's a two-time world champion, holds the world record in the free skating portion of the singles figure skating competition. He's going to be a favorite to win gold, but on the other hand, he's also still relatively new to the international stage. He's just 21, and I think there will be a lot of pressure on him just because of the history that he made and because Nathan Chen, who was the Olympic champion in 2022, is also an American, and I think this is, even though he's been like dominating the figure skating world, this is kind of going to be his first exposure to the mainstream. So it'll be really interesting to see how he fares on this stage.
Interesting. I feel like I've heard of Malinin, right? Like I feel like he's like somewhat of a household name in the term and like among Winter Olympic sports athletes, and I feel like it's almost hard to believe that this is his first Olympics. I guess he has 17 last time it was done. Wow. And Calvin, Eddie the Eagle is a classic. I feel like I remember one of my favorite sitcoms growing up. It was these kids were so inspired by Eddie the Eagle because he was such a normal dude like them that they started like getting like blankets and like luging down the stairs, just like falling down the stairs.
Yeah.
Trying to become Winter Olympics athletes. So Eddie the Eagle, a classic as well. All right. Well, speaking of athletes that may have had some fame to them, but maybe not in the way that they wanted in the Olympics, it's time for the farewell tour. So this may be the last time that many of these athletes get to compete for their respective sports, and a lot of greats are coming up this year. Lindsey Vonn, 41 years old now, as an alpine ski racer. The ice dancing duo of Charlene Guignard and Marco Fabri have been together in life and dance for over a decade and are set for their final Olympics. And then you have the likes of Rick Ruohonen, who is a reserve for Team USA curling at 54 years old. But of these older Olympians that, may or may not be competing for the last time, who stands out to you? Who should fans be rooting for? And is there someone else entirely that you're just truly excited to see?
Yeah, so this kind of segues into the next segment, but I'm going to go with Hillary Knight, who's competing in her fifth and final Olympics. She won the gold medal with the U.S. team in 2014, and she's probably going to be one of the veteran leaders on this year's U.S. women's hockey team, which is lost out to Canada to gold in 2022, but is the favorite to win gold this year. So she's definitely someone that helped put U.S. women's hockey on the map in her previous Olympic appearances. So like this Olympics, when the PWHL is kind of an established league and she's kind of one of the faces of the team, I think it's going to be a very storybook ending for her, so that's definitely one to keep out for. I was reading a ESPN article that like said, oh, like if you think of American women's hockey, like Hillary Knight is the first name that comes to mind. And then obviously Lindsey Vonn, another one, probably the American storyline of the Winter Olympics. Also recently read a profile on her from Times Sean Gregory, which kind of talked about how she was in retirement and then came out of retirement and started placing and getting these like really good results relative to the rest of her US competition. So definitely really impressive story for sure. I think she was compared to the likes of people like Tom Brady who are just still dominant in their 40s. So very very impressive this season. Those are the two names that I'm going with.
Lindsey Vonn intrigues me a lot too because like everybody knows her. I feel like stateside at least is like the skier. Like when you hear skiing, you think of Lindsey Vonn, right? But she's not the favorite this year by any means. There's so many other favorites in these skiing worlds. And to think that Lindsey Vonn might be kind of going in with that underdog mindset again after retiring is super cool to me.
Well, maybe it's like the Phillip Rivers unretirement that we just saw in football, where you have
Calvin, don't remind a Colts fan about Phillip Rivers.
I'm gonna say Lindsey Vonn is more legendary in her sport than Phillip Rivers is in his. Just going out on a limb here, but it sort of feels like that. I mean, he's someone who stepped in after retirement, played at a high level. But I agree with you. I mean, it's so.
I think
cool.
of it as a Daniel Bard on retirement, where he's still good.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. But I think it's like, I just think it's so cool where obviously at our age we have grown up with a different generation of Olympic athletes than what really exists right now. And so to think that like even when we were much younger, Lindsey Vonn was still a household name and still being dominant in her specific sport, and to see like a name like that come back and kind of link the past generation with the present favorites like you talked about. Obviously she's not as in her prime anymore, but it's cool to see a name like that be able to compete, someone who's so easily recognizable. And I think someone who fits those criteria on the men's hockey side is Sidney Crosby. I mean, at 38, former gold medal captain in 2014 for Canada. And he's someone who, is part of that old guard of the NHL, the Sidney Crosbys, Alex Ovechkins, probably going to retire sooner rather than later. And we've seen them have so many big battles in the NHL over the years and in the Olympics over the years. And so to get to represent Canada in what is likely one last time should be cool for him and cool for the viewers to watch.
And something we touched on last week, Calvin, it's the first time since that 2014 season when the NHL players are allowed back into the Olympics. So someone like Sidney Crosby is one of, only a couple dozen players, if that are still being able to compete 12 years later. It's a real testament to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm personally really excited about Rick Ruohonen. I put that as an example on here, but Ben and I talked a lot about curling last week. About how sweeping should be on HGTV, about how we don't quite understand the rules, but it's so fun to watch. And I'm a sucker for the old guard. Seeing Rick Ruohonen as a reserve for Team USA, look, I'm not wishing any harm on anyone. I don't want injuries. I think people should stay healthy. But can we please get this reserve into the Olympic team? Like, I want to see 54-year-old Rick Ruohonen just go in and really make a name for himself in Team USA, someone who's been doing it for a while. And I mean, 58 is the oldest Olympic medalist in history in the winter side of things. I'm not 100% sure about the summer, but that was also in curling. So if you see, Rich survive for another, well, not survive as in life and death, but as in keep being healthy and playing his sport well. Maybe even in another 4 years, we'll see him back and maybe setting some brand new records. But I know I'm going to have my eye on him. I'll be watching Lindsey Vonn. I'll be watching Sidney Crosby for sure. Well, Yanyan, you touched on this. You hinted at it in the last one. And something that we often see on when we're preparing for podcasts like this is let X yap. Just let someone yap. And in this case, I think it's a perfect opportunity to let Yanyan yap. So I'm going to get out of here quickly and let you take over. But the U.S. women's ice hockey team, we know you're a big fan of field hockey. So let's go onto the ice. Give us everything we need to know. Who are the players to watch? What are the storylines? Especially from the PWHL now. Like who are the storylines transferring over and what makes this Team USA so historic?
Gabe, it's funny how you talk about letting me yap, because on her take, which I will be on after this, I also have a segment where Chelsea just writes, let Yanyan yap. So I guess I'm just talking a lot today. But anyways, I was talking to Gabe before the show, and I was saying, like, I'm going to prefer Icy Veins because U.S. women's hockey is like a storyline I really want to get into this Winter Olympics because I'm not super familiar with hockey, but just like the star power on this team that has is again, like I said, the favorites to win gold this year. Like I think it can do a lot for the growth of women's hockey because this is the first Olympics where the PWHL is like an established league because in 2022 it didn't exist. So I think like you can have this opportunity of like watching these players in the Olympics and you come back and they have this professional league that they're playing in as well. So I think like those two going in tandem for the first time will be really good for the sport. But I think what intrigues me the most about this US team is that there's just like I said so much star power both from the PWHL and the college side actually because obviously you have players like Taylor Heisey who's the number one overall pick in the first overall PWHL draft. She's on the team. Hillary Knight obviously who also plays in the PWHL. Um, Grace Zumwinkle, I think that's how you say it. She was the 2023 to 2024 PWHL Rookie of the Year. Gwyneth Phillips, who won the playoff MVP. So all the American stars in the PWHL. But then you also have a lot of college players who are also on the team. Players who are actively competing in college. I mean, like we talk about. You talked about field hockey, Gabe, and how Northwestern had two active Olympians on its team, but Wisconsin women's hockey, the reigning national champions, has 4 players on its team who are gonna go to the Olympics in February, and that's Kristen Sims, Layla Edwards, who's the NCAA scoring leader, Ava McNaughton, who's their starting goalie, and Caroline Harvey. So that's 4 players on a college team who will be Olympians, which is crazy. There's also players like Joy Dunn from Ohio State. There's a Penn State player on the Olympic team, Tessa Janek and Abby Murphy, who actually was supposed to be the 2025 number 1 overall pick in the PWHL draft, but chose to stay in college. So you have like this dichotomy of someone who is an Olympian but is choosing to stay an extra year in the NCAA instead of going to her professional league. And she actually, I don't know if you guys saw, but there was a viral clip on, I think, ESPN last week of her like dribbling a ball between like a defender's legs and like making the assist. So just like players like that. And I think like because of the star power, like I think I recognize more names on the US women's hockey team than the men's hockey team. I mean, given that the Canadians are probably a lot stronger in men's hockey, but I think just the combination of players and storylines will be really good for the sport, and it's part of the reason why I kind of want to follow it more, and hence why I'm talking about it on this show.
I think it's interesting too if we're seeing people on opposite teams as well. I mean, you mentioned Team USA specifically. They're having 4 Wisconsin athletes, but I gotta wonder, like, are there players on Team Canada that are going to the same college as one another? Especially when it comes to a lot of these international teams. In other sports, especially, you see college players more prevalently on these international teams. So I'm wondering how these kind of rivalries are going to shake up. Do you know anything about like the PWHL rivalries and how that might play into any of these teams?
I honestly like I'm not super like
Sure,
locked
yeah.
in with the PWHL, but I know that the two MVPs from 2023, 24, and then 2024 to 2025 are both Canadian. So
Okay.
definitely a lot of star players on the Canada side, but the US actually, the reason why people are saying the US are the favorites is because at the rivalry series, which is when they last competed, I think a little bit before the Olympic teams were selected, they defeated Canada 24-7 across multiple matches. Just were totally dominant. So
Really?
even
Wow.
though Canada's the reigning gold medalist, the US definitely coming out with that mindset of revenge and wanting to take that back.
I mean, you got to imagine too, with how much has exploded both in the collegiate scene and the professional scene, that having that kind of outlet for U.S. players is going to help them so much. I mean, you see so often. I mean, especially we've talked about field hockey or lacrosse, for example, Yanyan, and you see a lot of these Olympians are people who are working their same 9-to-5 jobs because there's just not that outlet for like a professional sports league where you can get paid a living wage and dedicate so much time to it. But when you have the PWHL now, that's paying these players to the point where they're able to kind of really do hockey throughout their life and play at this professional level. You got to imagine just the extra time that they have to put into that is going to make these teams a whole lot better.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. And I think that's part of the reason why the US field hockey team struggle so much internationally, because I think it's like a ongoing conversation. It's like, aside from a handful of people that train in Charlotte with the U.S. national team, it's not like Europe or India where you have like a professional league, and that's why like I think there was like a discussion about whether this is like a whole other sport now, but why the U.S. junior field hockey team is actually stronger than the senior field hockey team, and it's because the club that they have this like club and collegiate system before you graduate college, but after college there just isn't that avenue. But in ice hockey there is now, so that's definitely, like you said, Gabe, gonna change things a lot.
Yeah, Maddie Zimmer has to go to calculus, but these athletes in USA's women's ice hockey team do not, in many cases, have to learn how to find the integrals. So we got a little time on our hands. We're gonna have a little more broad conversation now. We talked about college sports a little there. We can dive in a little more. We mentioned in the latest Summer Olympics, Northwestern had all these athletes, the likes of Rachel Lewis now with the AUSL having an outlet to play softball. We saw even first years like fencer Daphne Chen Nakje, and the first ever the ever popular Olympic field hockey athletes like Maddie Zimmer. But this time around, there's no Winter Olympic athletes for Northwestern. There's no history of Winter Olympians from Northwestern. What do we think this is? Is it just there's more sport offerings in the summer? Is it the fact that we don't have mountains here to ski down in Evanston? What do we kind of think this is? And do we think that potentially more Division I offerings could help a school like Northwestern or be better for collegiate athletics altogether?
I mean, I think so. I would be interested to see too, like what the percentages are of like how many Big Ten teams do have Winter Olympic athletes, because I do think it's something. I mean, especially obviously, you're not necessarily always going to get it. If Northwestern, for example, had a Division I hockey team, because professional players can get in, you're not going to get someone who's currently on the team necessarily to be an Olympian, with the NHL players, of course, returning. I mean, maybe depending on the nation that they're from, of course, but I do think it's just something that. It's interesting because you obviously, look outside. Northwestern's a cold school. It feels like a Winter Olympic school, and yet
I didn't want to walk here tonight. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. And yet, though, like all the successful sports for this school have really been in the fall and the spring. I mean, you think about the winter right now, and obviously, I mean, these aren't the only sports going on, but men's basketball, women's basketball, wrestling, none of them particularly successful, and none of them particularly not even Winter Olympics themed for that matter. And so it's a question of just I think it's just a natural disparity that I think a lot of schools probably deal with, is that a lack of Winter Olympians. But it is interesting, and it is also just leads into the conversation of why doesn't Northwestern have a Division I field hockey team? Because Division I ice hockey team, I should say.
Oh,
we know they have by far the best Division I field hockey team, but Division I ice hockey team, I don't know. It seems like a perfect school to be competing for Frozen Fours, and it doesn't exist. And so, I think that's a conversation that's interesting for sure.
And yeah, Northwestern, not in the NCAA for hockey, but I believe it's the AHCA, right?
I think so. Yeah.
D3 men's, D2 women's that just started this year as well. I know Obscure Ballers last quarter had the chance to talk to a member of that women's club ice hockey team. But yeah, definitely not in the NCAA level, but there's certainly club teams competing, and perhaps that eventually becomes an NCAA team.
Yeah, I think to add on to Calvin's point, I just don't think there's as many NCAA sanctioned sports that are also in the Winter Olympics. I mean, I think hockey's really the first and only one that comes to mind. I know some schools have like skiing teams, like I think Vermont's won a bunch of skiing national championships, but that's just extremely niche. And I feel like there's a lot of Winter Olympic athletes that go to college academically, but they kind of have to like put it off for a little bit to study, to focus on their training. And to bring up Nathan Chen again, he went to Yale, but he had to like pretty much give up a lot of his figure skating career to focus on being a student at Yale. That's why he stopped competing after the 2022 Olympics. I know Chloe Kim, snowboarding gold medalist, she went to Princeton, kind of took a break from her sport as well. So I just think with like a lot of these winter sports, because you can't really compete collegiately with them, it's just hard to balance school and sport. So you don't see as many of these like alumni situations because they're not active college athletes in that sport.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by it though, Yanyan, because I feel like there are a lot of opportunities to kind of create these avenues, right? I mean, obviously with a school like Northwestern, you're not going to get a snowboarding team. You're not going to get a skiing team.
It'd be cool.
But like figure skating, for example, I think Northwestern, imagine figure skating in Welsh Ryan Arena, right? If there are athletes down there, you cover with an ice. I mean, I'm obviously like, I come from Massachusetts where, the basketball team, the men's team at least, is not very good anymore. But then in the winter, they covered with a sheet of ice. They put the hockey team out there, and the hockey team wins national championships, right? In a very cold climate. And I feel like I don't see why Northwestern can't be the same, right? Whether it's figure skating or hockey. I'm sure they could get some athletes out there, even something like skeleton, which I will be going on a skeleton deep dive at some point this quarter. But like that's a sport where you don't necessarily need a mountain, you need a track, right? If you guys had to pick one sport that you think might be the next one for the NCAA to add, or that you would love to see on the NCAA circuit, that's from the Winter Olympics, what's your pick? We'll close it out with this.
It's a tough one. Snowboarding would be so cool. It's not actually realistic because what?
I think you could get it with the right schools. I mean, fencing's D1, and you only have 30 schools or so.
Yeah, I guess you're 30 schools. Yeah, I think they could do it with 30 schools. Yeah, we'll say that.
I'm gonna go with figure skating because I think it's kind of like ice gymnastics, and I feel like gymnastics has made a name for itself in the NCAA. Why can't figure skating?
Alrighty, well, thank you so much for coming on with me, Yanyan and Calvin. It's been another great half hour of talking about niche Winter Olympic sports. If you want to come on and you're part of WNUR, feel free to let me know for next week. For those tuning in on YouTube and here on WNUR 89.3 FM, HD1, Evanston, Chicago, thank you for listening. Her take is up.